Hello and welcome back. In this tutorial we're going to look at adding some platforms and some other game objects. Now unfortunately when I did this video, I've already done this video and I did not have my mic on. For some reason it was muted out, so I'm redoing it. Rather than delete all of the objects and try to figure out where the connections are, because again, as you become familiar with, when you delete an object, if you have it connected somewhere else and you start getting all these errors. So I'm not going to go through that. I am going to go through the objects themselves though and how to create them. Okay, so obviously my screen is going to be quite different from yours currently. There's a number of things here that we haven't done yet. So we have not created the saw, the rock head, or the finish flag, or these platforms. But that's fine. We're going to go over a lot of the scripting for, in particular, the platforms and the saw are really the same as we've done with the mushroom. So some of this scripting was the same anyways. So to get the platforms, so these platforms you can see I've added in here. What you want to do is in your art folder, if you go down to traps, and then under traps you have these platforms. And then you have a brown off and on, so a brown platform or a gray platform. So what you want to do, as you've had to do a number of times now, these are not set to. So for example, did I change them all? No, so I haven't changed this one yet because I haven't used it. So these are always set to, right, 100 pixels, single, and so on. So you do need to, I don't want to change that to 0. You do have to change them so that they are in the right format, right? So when you click on this, you're not going to have all these objects because again, remember this is all one, it's basically one image. So what you need to do is, so with your gray on one, you're going to go up, you're going to change this to multiple, 16 pixels per unit, and then you're going to make sure this is point no filter. You apply it, and then you want to go to the sprite editor, and then you slice based on grid size. And the grid size is 32 by 8, right? So if you slice by another size, that's not going to. And again, when you put in 32 by 8, it's going to, right? It should slice them exactly. Sometimes this is really just playing with it. So for example, let's say you say 32, it automatically 8 is the biggest size for that, for the height for the Y, and so it automatically puts that to 8. And then it's usually multiples again of 16, 32, 64, and so on. And this works. So 32 by 8 slices them properly. And then we can exit this. Let's apply it anyways, even though they've already been done. And then again, same as we did for our other game objects. Right, I'll kind of walk through creating another one. You want to drag this up into the hierarchy. And then it creates this game object. Again, it's not visible because it's not in the foreground, so change it to the foreground. Okay, so with it in the foreground now, so I just renamed the one up and down platform. And you want to add, so you're going to add a component. So we want to add a rigid body because we want to be able to move it. So add your rigid body. Because this one is going to be an up-down platform, we don't want gravity acting on it. So set the gravity scale to 0 because otherwise gravity is just going to affect it and it's going to fall to the ground. The other thing is you want the mass to be relatively high because when you jump on it, even though gravity is not affecting, your mass affects it. So you want to set the mass to a high value. So 40, 50, I think the one I have here is, so I said it's 40 there as well. And the reason that is because when you do jump on the platform, if it's not set to a high value, you will impact its what happens to it. So add your rigid body, and other than that, we want, because this is in the Y, we're going to freeze the Z and X rotation, and then we're going to add a component. So you're going to add a collider, so box collider 2D, and then with the box collider 2D, we want to edit it because it's relatively big. I'm actually going to move this because it's over that spot there. So we're going to edit the collider, and you want it so that it's kind of on the platform itself. So you can drag it in a bit. I'm going to drag it also in a little bit on the platform, and that's it. So that's good. So now we have our rigid body, we have our collider, and then the other thing you want to add is an animator. So we're going to add an animator. So the animator, and then you would add the animator to it. And the same as our mushroom, this is always going to be in the run position. So with your platform clicked on, go to animation, you create a clip, and then again, make sure you're saving it in your folder under animations, and then just call it platform animation. So what you're going to do then is you drag in all of your images for the animation, and just because I don't want to go back and create another one, I'm just going to go to this one. And when you push play, right, all it's doing is it's just showing you that this bolt is turning, so it gives some life to it. It makes it look like that platform is moving. Now, the other things that you can notice here is that I have added is that I do have on our platform, I've added a sticky material. Right, so if we go back to our platform, I can do this on here. So we want to add, so in your materials, where's my materials? Right, so in my materials, the same way you created your other physics 2D, you can right click, create another one. So again, right click, you want to create a physics 2D material, and then you can call it, I've just created one called sticky, and then you change the friction value. Oops. So you change the friction. I set it to a very high number, because what was happening when I created this first time was when you jumped on it, even with 0.5, even with 10 friction, because the platform is relatively small, you tended to fall off. Similarly, if I push play on the side-to-side platform, in particular, so in that side-to-side platform, when you right, so you kind of land on your stick. Otherwise, you would fall off. Similarly, as that platform moves back, you can see we move slightly to the side when the platform turns direction. Again, with not a lot of sticky material, you essentially fell off the platform when it changed direction. So you do want to add, so in your rigid body or your collider, you can do it to both just to be redundant. Right, you're going to drag the sticky material, move it to the material, and then same for the that one. The other thing that we want to add, so then we're going to add another collider. So add another collider. And similar to what happened with our edges, we don't want to stick to the edges, right? Right now, if you jump and you hit the platform on the side, you can stick to it. So we're going to do the same thing. So I've added another collider. You're going to edit it. And then we're going to move it over to, so it's on the outside of there. And this time we want to add our slippery material. Right, so it adds our slippery material. So now if you hit the side, you're going to slide off. The same as our edges and the walls and so on. And then you, again, could make another collider and put it on the other side. The other thing that I added to it is, if we go back to this one, you can see I also have a collider on the bottom. And that's because, again, when you, and this is where, right, you play with the scripting, play with the objects, see what works. So what was happening is if I played, and so when I played, I had to add something to stop the platform from stopping me. So if I actually turn off that, so let's turn this one off, go back in. So the first time I constructed it, oh, maybe that's not the right one. Okay, anyways, what was happening was oh, that's my slippery edges. Maybe it's this one. It's one of these. Okay, there. So it was that one there. Right, so without that trigger on the bottom, the platform sticks to you and you get stuck, right? So you can't move at that point. So you do need to make sure that you do have those. I just got to turn those back on now. Oh, I know, because I had it as a trigger. And the other box collider, I don't know why that was a trigger, but I'll leave it there for now. I might have to go back and fix it. But anyways, that's fine. So you saw that I had to add in something there to trigger when it hits the player, it doesn't stick, right? It just changes back direction. And that's it. So that's really the game object itself. So you drag the platform in, create these slippery edges, make it a sticky, and then create a little trigger on the bottom. So in the script, okay, so again, you would have to add new script. I called my script up down platform. And then from there, you start the scripting. So I'm going to go through the script. Again, this is very similar, pretty much the same as our mushroom. So what you want to do is we want to get because in this case, unlike the mushroom, I guess, we have an up limit. So it's going to get up to a certain spot, and then a down limit where we get down to a certain spot. So our mushroom, we did change as well in one of the previous videos, how it can just, if there's a collision that's not the ground of the player, then it's going to change direction. Right, so it's going to just keep moving, so it's not patrolling between spots. It can just move there, hit the wall, move back, and so on. So in this case, you could do the same thing where if there's a collision, then it changes direction. In this case, I do want my platform to really just go between kind of the spots. And then similarly, we won't get that issue with the platform moving up and then our player getting stuck on the bottom of the other platforms and so on. So anyway, so in the script, so we want to create an up limit, so a serialized field, private float up limit, as well as a down limit. Again, you can arbitrarily set these. And again, you will be changing those in your game, right? So same as your mushroom, we want to find out, okay, what's the up limit? So we can drag this up to the top, or, we want it to go to about there. So it's about 13.6. And then our down limit will go to a little bit further down. So I was looking at the X, not the Y. So our Y, so our negative 2.6 down, and our up limit would be 5.5 or so. And then in your script, you would set those, right? So you create these up-down limits, and then you set them to how high you want it to move up and how low you want it to go. The other thing with the script variable that you need to create is your move speed, right? So again, serialized float, move speed, and then we can arbitrarily set this to 4. You can change it in the inspector to something that moves the way you want it to. And then similar to before, we want to create a rigid body, or we want to be able to get a rigid body so we can move the platform. And then similar as well, we want to identify when it's moving down, right? So we're going to create a bool called moving down, and we're going to set it to be true. So that means it's going to start moving down. Again, because we're moving rigid body, you want it as a fixed update. So in the fixed update, we want to say if the platform is moving down. So if it's moving down, and if the transform.position.y, right? So that's the position of the platform in the y direction. So if it is not at the down limit, so i.e. it's greater than or equal to the down limit, then what do we want to happen? We want to move the platform, so rb.velocity equals new vector 2 and 0 and then negative move speed. So negative move speed means it's going down, right? So it's going to move down in the y direction, and then moving down equals true. Else, which means that, okay, the platform has now reached this down limit, so now we want to say moving down equals false. And then in that else statement, you would say if the transformed up, because now it's moving up, you want to make sure it hasn't reached the up limit yet. Right, so if we kind of move this out a bit, so kind of moving down, so it's moving down is true, it's moving down, it's not at the limit. Okay, now it reaches the limit. So now moving down is false. So now it's going to start moving up, because that's what we're going to trigger it to do, and then it keeps moving up until it reaches the up limit, and so on. So in your script, right, so if the transformed up position is less than or equal to the up limit, so that means it hasn't reached it yet, we want to move it up. So rb.velocity equals new vector 2 and 0 and a positive move speed, which moves it up in the y direction. And then we would say else, which means it has reached the up limit, moving down is true, which then it reaches the up limit, it now goes back to this statement, and now moving down is true, so now it's going to make the platform move down, and so on. And then the other thing that I had to add after kind of initially doing it was this trigger event. So on trigger enter 2D, and that's why I have that as a trigger on the bottom of the platform, then we're going to, and actually that's right, that shouldn't be a trigger on the sides of the platform, because otherwise when you hit it from the side, it's going to change this and make the platform move up. So we do want those as colliders. So anyway, so on trigger, if moving down, if the collision is with the player, then moving down is false. Right, and all that does is, as I said, so with this trigger here, when it moves down, it hits the player, it's going to just move back up. You could just have it move between where it's higher than the player, and that solves that problem as well. And that's it. So that's really it for that platform. The left-right platform that I have created is basically the exact same thing. You could just take, and what I did was I really just took this, copied it, so make a duplicate of it, and then I just changed, so I can do that again, I'll just make a duplicate, and then just change the name of it to left-right platform. Right, and then we could move it off. So then with this left-right platform, all I did was I deleted the script, and then I just added a new script and called it left-right platform. And in the left-right platform script, it's basically the exact same code. So you could go in here, copy this code over, and the only thing you're changing is your limits, right? So the left limit and right limit, and then it's if moving left is true, and so on. And this is really the same as our mushroom. So this one is exactly the same as the mushroom, for that matter. And this time we don't need this trigger event because it's not pinning the platform down. I did change it to moving left. So let's say you do have a platform that, so let's say it moves, I don't know, and I don't think I really have a spot here that's, okay, let's just say over here. So let's just say over here we have a platform that is moving back and forth here instead of putting this platform here, right? So you might want it that if it's moving right and it hits the player, then it's going to reset moving that way. But otherwise, as long as it's kind of out in the open, which typically these would be, you don't really need to identify if it collides with the player to stop it from pinning the player against the wall, essentially. And that was it for those two platforms. The other object that we added was a saw. And for the saw, you can, again, in your traps, there's a saw. Again, the same thing, we're going to just use the on ones. So you would have to do the same thing. You want to do multiple images, 16 pixels, point no filter, apply it, and then slice the saws. And these are 38 by 38, it looks like is the slice by. Yeah, so they're 38 by 38. So these actually are not exactly in between those normal, but that's fine. So you slice them, and then again, same as we did for the other one, you drag the saw up. This is blue for, don't worry about that right now. But you would drag the saw up into your scene. Again, it's not there, so we're gonna just, in this case, if we move it to the foreground, what happens is it will move it to sometimes on top of our grass and sometimes in behind, right? We don't want that, so you actually want to set it to the midground, and that's it, right? So that's kind of the biggest thing. And then with the saw, you add the same things as we've always done, right? Add your rigid body, add your, excuse me. And thinking of that, going back to our left-right platform, if you were kind of playing with it and realize that the platform falls to the ground or doesn't move left and right, why doesn't it move left and right? Right? So if you did it the way I just mentioned, and you copy it over, so you duplicated the up-down and changed it to left-right, did everything, changed the script, it doesn't move left-right. So think about it now, why do you think it's not moving left-right? Okay, so if you're able to figure that out, that's great. If not, remember, because we copied it from our, right, we duplicated this one, so our up-down platform is frozen in the X direction, so it can't move left and right. So our left-right platform that you duplicated, you just need to change this, right? So it's not frozen there, it's frozen in the Y. Right, so I guess it would look like this initially. So you don't want it frozen in the X, but you do want it frozen in the Y, in the Z direction. And that's it. So that's the only thing that's different. Gravity you can leave as 0. It's not going to impact it anyways. And for the saw, the collider that you add, so again, it's frozen in the YZ. And this time I did it slightly different. I set it as a trigger. And that's because I know in past versions, if you set this as a collider that wasn't triggered, it would sometimes collide with the other object. So for example, it would collide with the ground. So it would mess up. Again, when I played with this, it did work either way. Since I have it set as a trigger, I'm going to leave it as a trigger. And the code is, the animation is doing the exact same thing we did, so I'm not going to go over that. And then the script is, again, really the same script as well. Right, so you can really copy that left-right platform, and there's nothing really different here. So it's the same script that we have, you know, left limit, right limit, move speed, and then it moves and so on. So there's nothing different there. It's the exact same as our platform. The other thing that you do want to add though is, because this saw is going to hurt the player, you need to add that into so that it can hurt the player. Right, so the way to do that is you want to, in our player script, okay, so in our player script, so if you go down to, and again, I might have a few things in here that we haven't touched on yet, that's because it was in a future video, but in the player script we have, so void on trigger enter 2D, so it's on trigger event with our mushroom, that kills the mushroom, right? If you remember, that's going to then give us the jump force off of the mushroom, so it's not doing any damage to us, but then on the mushroom script it turns the mushroom off. As well, under this trigger event, we could say if the collision.gameobject.compare tag is the saw, which again, how do we do that? So you want to go up. So when you have your saw selected, we want to add a tag. So you have to add a tag, and then you would just add another one and you would call it saw. All right, so I'm just going to call this, let's just call it bat. So you would call it saw. And then you go into your saw and you make sure that you select and tag it as a saw. Right, and then that's it. So that's going to get the trigger when with the saw. So only those saws will cause this trigger. So if our collision is with the saw, then we want our state equals state dot is hurt. And then because it's a saw, it's going to do more damage. So unlike our mushroom is a trigger event, or sorry, a collision event, and our mushroom only runs this health thing, which when we go down to the health, it subtracts 1 health. So all this does is by doing this as a trigger and taking a health off here, so when you hit the saw, you lose 1 health or 1 heart. And then it does that, which also loses another heart. So you lose 2 hearts or 2 health units. And then the other thing I wanted to do, because the saw I have as the move speed I think was 8, the move speed was faster, and with just a normal bounce effect, the saw was often catching up to us before we could even move out of the way, so it just kept hitting us. So I wanted to create a bigger bounce effect or hurt force. And all I did with that was really, so the same as our mushroom coroutine, so I really just set up a different coroutine. So if the collision is, so the same as our bounce effect, right? So if the collision with the game object, if the position of the saw is greater than our position, then we want to bounce to the left. If the position of the saw is the opposite, then we want to bounce to the right. And I just called this bounce left 2 and bounce right 2. And then I created those IE numerators, bounce left 2 and bounce right 2. And all I really did was copied the same one we had for our mushroom, and I just changed the hurt force. So I added a 2 times, so rather than being negative hurt force, I did -2 times the hurt force. And then same for the bounce right, I just did 2 times the hurt force. And everything else is the same, right? So we still change the color of our sprite. We still get hurt, so it bounces us back. We wait 1/3 of a second, reset our color, and then turn our state back to not hurt. So that's the scripting for the saw. I think for the rocket, I will go over kind of what I did in the next video, just because it's a little bit longer and the scripting is quite different. The scripting for these platforms and the saw was really the same as the mushroom, right? So anyway, so that's it for this video. In the next video, I'll go over the rock head, and then after that, we'll look at finishing up the final touches for the game. So that's it for now. Take care, and I'll see you in the next video.